Today, I have Charlotte Holmes on the podcast. Who's Charlotte Holmes? She's an egg donor. You can find her at Miss Char Holmes, MISS, on Instagram, and she is amazing. She's an egg donor who is doing egg donation just out of the goodness of her heart. She is not compensated the way that you're compensated in the US. She did this because she wants to. And she's a model, and she's a yoga teacher, and she was Miss England, believe it or not. And she has such a big heart. She really wants to help another family because she is not going to have children herself. And she really wanted to help another family who wanted children. So tune in. I think you will be fascinated by her perspectives and fascinated by the way that she sees egg donation, donor-conceived children, and the recipients who really want to have a family. Welcome to Donor Conception Conversations. This is a one podcast created exclusively for people who are planning to use donor conception to build their family, or for people who have already used donor conception to build their family. My name is Lisa Schumann, and I'm your host. I'm a therapist, I'm an author, I'm a researcher, and the host of this podcast. And I'm passionate about helping people find a better path to parenthood. And today we have Charlotte Holmes on with us. Now, if you're not watching this on YouTube and you're listening on an audio platform, that's fine. But I really recommend you take a peek on YouTube because this woman is beautiful inside and out. And I know that sounds cliche, but you will not believe your ears and your eyes when you see this interview. So please take a look. Peek on YouTube and you can see for yourself. So this is a woman who was a model. Then she won Miss England. Then she became a yoga teacher and she's an egg donor, believe it or not. It sounds too good to be true, but it's absolutely true. And her story is so beautiful. You have to hear. So welcome, Charlotte. Thank you so much for coming on. I think you can really teach our audience a lot about what it feels like to be an egg donor and what your life is like and what your perspective is like. So could we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing now and how you decided to walk down this path of being an egg donor?
For sure. I mean, what an introduction. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And hi, I'm just waving for the YouTubers. I'm now a yoga teacher. I've done a bit of a modeling transition, come through my modeling days, finished up most of that now. And teach yoga full time. I'm 34. I live in Hackney in East London with my husband, my 3-year-old beagle, who is my fur baby, the only offspring I will have. So I'm an IVF baby. My parents had many troubles, many issues, many bumps in their road to parenthood back in the 80s. And they spent around 8 years trying different methods to conceive. Mum always says, she's like, I took so many drugs. And it's like, not the fun drugs either.
Right.
I had to take all these drugs. And she had various operations and X, Y, and Z. Anyway, essentially, they ended up conceiving through IVF, which is beautiful. They had me, and then 2.5 years later, they had my sister through the same process. And that was way back when, 34 years ago, when IVF was relatively new as a process. So it's something that's always been kind of sat with me. People have always said, "Oh, that's so cool, you're an IVF baby," but it's never been something up until my 30s that I'd ever really appreciated as a process, because I wasn't looking to get pregnant myself. I'm actually not looking ever to get pregnant myself. My husband and I have decided that we don't want to have children. And so therefore, I'd never really kind of gotten into the how do we get pregnant thing. And lots of my friends have been going through it the past few years. And it's something that I'm very aware of as a married woman in my 30s. People are often asking about it. So the IVF process kind of has come back into my life. I was conceived and birthed by it, and now it's coming back, and it's been around and about my kind of sort of zone and energy
in your world,
by
right?
virtue of my age. Yeah, it's been back into my world by virtue of my age and by virtue of getting married. But I don't want kids.
Even in our day and age, you were telling me before that as you got into this phase in life and you get married, you were thinking, I don't want to ever have children myself. And people were not asking you if you're going to have children, but you were feeling like everybody was asking you when.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen a lot where I live and in my circles, but it still happens too much. And if I go back home and I see my parents and their friends, it's the sort of thing that, yeah, I get asked. And there's a few other bits. That's a whole other podcast, I feel, in itself, maybe on that. But yeah, it's quite an interesting one, actually, going through that process when someone says, well, why don't you want kids? I'm sorry. Yeah, we could reverse that question.
Right.
Anyway, I still get asked that, and it's something that I battle with and have equal amounts of peace and hate and love for when someone asks me, because ultimately, like, it's my choice. It's a big decision in my life, and it's something that I've really, really thought about, especially since I got married, especially when my husband and I started dating. You know, it was like a first date topic. Like, I was straight in. I was like, well, look, I don't want children. I've never wanted them. So there's no point in us continuing this if you feel strongly about having a family of your own. It's something I've considered. So when people are like, oh, well, why not? The why question, when are you having babies question, it sometimes slips out, I feel, when people aren't really thinking. It's a bit of a unconscious, like, oh, so when are you having babies? And then when you say, I don't want them, it's the follow-up questions that really get me. The curiosity I can handle, maybe reword it, if would be better. But it's the questions afterwards. Why? I'm sorry.
Yeah, right.
It's unfathomable. Anyway, I don't want to get into that because it is what it is and people will ask questions. So I've come into this phase where I'm kind of experiencing friends going through IVF. My sister wants to have babies. Her and her husband have just started not trying. Is that right? They don't want to say they're trying, but they're not trying anymore. And so many of my friends are having problems and they're going through IVF, and lots of friends are single and freezing their eggs. And this is a pretty hard time for women, and it's a stressful period of your life, and it's challenging. And I feel all those things, even as somebody that doesn't want their own children. Okay, so just a caveat, I am around that, and I do feel it, even though it's something that I'm not personally striving for. I'm really close to my granny. I was really close to my granny. She was one of 10 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
She had 2 children. I'm one of her 6 grandchildren. She had about 15 great-grandchildren, and she ended up with 1 great-great-grandchild before she died last year in December at 102. So she had an amazing, long, beautiful life with lots of family and lots of babies in her life all the time. And once James and I got married, she would ask, when are you gonna give me godchildren? She'd say, when are you gonna give me grandchildren? Sorry, when are you gonna give me babies? And she's the only person that I kind of never really got into the conversation with. I never told her the truth, I guess. I never said to her, I don't want them, because she just wouldn't have understood. At 102, that generation of women were wives in order to reproduce. That was just how that process worked, especially in her head, especially as fertile as she was, and like with all the grandchildren that then kept giving birth to other kids. Like, I don't think would have really, even with mum and dad's troubles with IVF, I don't know how much of that I don't know how much of that she was involved with. I just think she wouldn't have got it, and it would have been a conversation that would have upset her, and one that I just didn't want to have. So when she passed, although I knew I really didn't want them, one of the last things she said to me was, you and James must have babies. When are you having babies? Like, it was a real desire of hers was for us. And I guess it came from she wanted us to be happy. And in her head, that's what that would bring.
That's what you do.
And that's not our truth. You know, that's not the reality that we're living in. And that's the decision we've made. But honestly, it just completely broke me thinking back to that, her saying that to me. I guess I felt like I wasn't truthful with her. I should have told her. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. Anyway, I battled with this thing after she died. And my husband said, don't worry, like, you know, she'd have supported you whatever you did. And I said, if I didn't tell her, she didn't have the opportunity to support my choice because I didn't tell her. Going down this rabbit hole of feeling guilty about not having children because I should have told her and all this stuff, which is so silly looking back now. But I was in a real rut with it all. And I was speaking to a friend who had donated her eggs. who lives in New Zealand, one of my best friends, she donated an egg to a friend. She's got 3 babies of her own, and her close friend couldn't use her own egg, so she donated an egg. And I remember having this conversation with her. I was like, that's amazing. Like, wow, like you've given one of your eggs away so that your friend can have a baby. Like, that's just miraculous, like beautiful. And I never considered it for myself because I was never going to be a mother. And for whatever reason, I hadn't kind of put those two things together, but I don't need them. Oh, but someone else can have them. Just because I don't want to use them, somebody else can have them. Then that was it. The can of worms was fully opened up, and I was deep into this rabbit hole of like researching where you can do it, who does it, why would you do it, who benefits from the eggs. Every avenue led me closer and closer to this kind of innate feeling of that's exactly what I should be doing. That's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I can't believe I haven't thought of this already. Like, how am I 34 and I haven't thought about this? God damn you, Charlotte, like get to it. So straight away I was like researching, emailed the London Egg Bank, and I said, listen, I'm really interested in doing this. I understand I have to do it before I'm 35, which is next month, so September of this year. And in January, I'm thinking, I'm like, quick, take my eggs if you need them because I'm going to run out of time. Anyway, so then I started this process of going through how it looks and, you know, the consultation and the screening and all of the stuff that you go through. Now I've come to the end of that journey, and I've done the donation and I've finished, and I think I'm kind of a month and a half past that, and my hormones have recalibrated as best as they maybe could after a few weeks. And it just felt like a real full circle moment for me. It felt like a really beautiful, like, closure to like a kind of an open wound almost. It's like there was something kind of missing. I'm an IVF baby, but I don't want my own kids. So why is this not? And there's this resistance. And I've finished this process and I'm like, yeah, great. Wow. It just feels amazing. I'm thrilled that it was something I was able to do, because lots of women at 34 aren't able to do it. Lots of women at 34 don't have a high enough AMH to go into the process, or they feel emotionally tied to their eggs and they don't feel like it's something that they can give away. So there's so many different things. So I felt really grateful that I felt in a position both mentally and emotionally to do it firstly, and then I was physically able. So yeah, all in all, just a huge amount of gratitude for being able to do the process, and a huge amount of gratitude to the clinic. They were wonderful from start to finish. The doctors were amazing. Like, I went in for that egg retrieval situation and they're just so chill. She was like, yeah, sit down, we're going to do this, da, da, da. And they were just so relaxed. And I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, got this. Okay,
That's
down
fantastic.
I go. You know, you just think, wild that they're taking eggs out of follicles inside your ovaries.
Yeah.
Wow. Mind was blown. My mind
Yeah.
was blown. And I came out of the op like, we're done? We're done here? She was like, yeah, we got 39 eggs. I was like,
Wow.
I'm sorry, what? What now?
It's incredible.
It's an incredible thing that they do. It's just, the process blows my mind. And I honestly like have nothing but admiration for everyone that's allowing this process to happen. And I really urge like women, if you don't want them, like, let someone else have them. Like, give them up.
Well, it's amazing that you have that perspective, Charlotte. I mean, you know, I hear what you're saying, but I think it's just a beautiful thing, and I think that most of the people out there probably wouldn't consider, because, you know, here in the US, we are compensated quite a bit, particularly if you do it privately at an agency, and, you know, being Miss England and being so smart and being all of these things, you would certainly be hugely compensated in the US. And I think all of you out there should know that Charlotte was not compensated, that she really felt that she wanted to do this out of the goodness of her heart to help people who couldn't have children on their own without the help of their eggs. And she really feels in her heart that she wants to help people who can't have children. She doesn't want them. So it's really her value that she wants to help other people. And it's really an incredible thing. I mean, you were explaining to me earlier, you're compensated for some expenses if you need it, but
Yeah.
in England, you're not compensated like you are in the US. And you really felt like this was something you wanted to do from your heart, which is really incredible.
Mm.
Really
I
incredible.
mean, for complete transparency, I was paid the payment is £750. I don't know what that equates to in USD. I think it's probably quite a similar amount at the moment with the exchange rate. But that was neither here nor there. I didn't actually realize that there was any kind of compensation at all until I got to the end of the screening, the first in-person screening where they take the bloods and you give your urine sample and you're waiting for the genetic tests to come back. She's like, "Oh, we need your bank details," and I'm like, "Huh? What? What do you want those for?" So it was really something that was in the back of my mind. However, I will also say that I did want to help people, but it was definitely, for me, it was also definitely a really healing process. I got a lot from it. It wasn't just like, "Oh, I want to help people, yay!" Like, it was, this for me felt like the right thing for me to be doing, and it allowed me to put away a lot of grief that I had from my grand passing. It allowed me to put away a lot of grief and shame I felt around not wanting babies. It allowed a lot of these things to settle into my 34-year-old self. So it's been a really transformational process for me as well. So, yes, it was the goodness of my heart, but it was selfish in that I knew that it was going to help. I knew that it was going to be good for me, and I knew that I'd come out at the end of it better off mentally and physically because of it, because it definitely healed a lot of stuff for me as well.
And brought you kind of full circle from this IVF baby to all of these experiences and back to kind of giving your eggs, right? And so it's kind of like you've come full circle in your life.
Yeah, it really feels like that. And I mean, I'd also do it again. Like I'd go again. I spoke to the clinic. They ring you about a month after. And she said to me at the end of the call, because 39 eggs is quite a lot of eggs also, just to caveat that, like, that's quite a big batch, so to speak. And she said at the end, she was like, well, if you did want to come again, like, we'd love to have you. It'd be a much quicker process next time because you've got all your stuff. And I was like, well, I thought I'm too old, like at 35. She was like, no, you have your 35th year to donate as well. So it's actually up until, in the UK anyway, it's up until your 36th birthday. So I've got another 13 months left. So I'm thinking, okay, well, when can I fit this in again? I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. I would definitely also say it was a process. Like, it was a time. I was emotional and hormonal, and it wasn't a walk in the park.
No,
it's not easy. It wasn't easy, but for me, I was so vested, and I knew it was such an important thing for me to do that actually, like, everything that came up, all the emotional roller coasters and stuff, I just recognized as being part of this process. Like, it wasn't something that I was completely fine with everything that happened. I should mention, like, there were challenging times. Like, my ovaries were like satsumas and my belly was huge, and I felt lethargic, and I snapped at my husband, and I didn't want to walk my dog, and it was a challenging couple of weeks. So bear that in mind as well. But for me, the whole process as an overall has been absolutely just one of the best things I've ever experienced and will ever experience, I think. So yeah,
it's incredible.
It's been really, 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 really incredible. Yeah, I got to write a letter as well. I didn't mention this. Once you have done the initial call, you get all of the forms to fill in, obviously, because they need to know, the people that are receiving the eggs need to know certain information, i.e. your hair color, your eye color, your height, what your likes and dislikes are. They get to know all the bits and pieces so that they can make informed choices. And in that same process, they ask you optionally, do you want to write a letter to the potential parents, an anonymous letter to the potential parents? And then the next page was, do you want to write a letter to the potential child that's born of your eggs anonymously? Whoa, wow. My mind was blown. So I'm writing this letter to this baby, this child, this human that hasn't yet arrived, but is in me. Honestly, just incredible.
It's incredible.
Yeah, all of that was really, really incredible. Yeah.
So if you don't mind me asking, did you explain in the letter how you felt that this was really important for you to do this?
Yeah,
That's wonderful.
I went into quite a lot of detail. Yeah, into quite a lot of detail, especially with the one to the parents, and just explained this is my why essentially. Yeah, I mean it's a strange one, isn't it? Because will they read it? Will it make a difference? Like, are they just going to look at, okay, she's got green eyes and brown hair and she's 5'10"? Okay, that's the right genetics for us. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't want to know anymore. You don't know, but I thought if I'm going to go into this, like, if you can tell, I go into everything quite heart on sleeve. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. I was like, I'm definitely writing the letter, like, to both, yeah, the parents and the unborn child. And in that same vein, just thinking about that, of course, if an 18-year-old young adult came into my life when I'm 52, 53, however old, and said, "Hi, I'm made of you," like, yeah, of course I'm going to welcome them with open arms and try and, be as loving and honest as I could be. So that kind of answers your previous question. I guess I'd never really thought about it that way round.
I just want to explain this to the audience. So, for many people in our audience, we have people all over, and we have a lot of people who watch us from England. But for those of you who are not in the UK, it's helpful to know that there are new rules about openness and that the children are entitled to meet their donors at the age of 18. And this is just kind of across the board. This is not like in the United States where you have state by state rules. You have some agencies that create some rules and some places don't. This is really kind of across the board in the UK. And so the potential child or children can approach Charlotte when they're older and ask her anything from, when did she learn how to ride a bike, or does she like chocolate or vanilla, or, or about her health, right? And so what we were talking about before we came on was what would that be like for her? So I think it'd be interesting for the audience to know how you feel about that, because some people now, and of course, egg and sperm donation now has been around for a while, and people have different experiences with their donors when they meet their donors. So you were sharing with me that your perspective was that you feel like you've given this kind of gift of your eggs to a family so that they could have children, so they could realize their dream. And it's also very beneficial for you. But that act in of itself is what's valuable to you. It's not that you feel that, well, I'm the genetic parent to this child. You're really thinking about the legal parents as being the parents and you being the donor who's given, done something wonderful for this family. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I feel I won't have genetic children out there. I mean, I guess scientifically they are, but that's not how I feel about them. Ultimately, children are raised by their parents, raised by their mothers and their fathers. And the role of that person is to nurture them and love them and care for them and teach them and be there when they fall off their bike for the first time that the stabilizers come off. That's not what I'm going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that person, but I've just allowed that process to happen by giving the missing piece, I guess, is how I feel about it. It's like there's a bit that isn't going to work here. Well, I've got one and I don't need it, so you have that bit. That's it for me. So yeah, perhaps in the future there'll be multiple mini Shahs, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not mine. They're not mine, and they're nothing to do with me other than genetically. They might look a little bit like me, but hey, that happens sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Sometimes not. But yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really good for people to hear, because sometimes when we have open relationships in the US, and there are some places where you can have open relationships, both the donors and the recipients have this fear that both of them, like the donors are afraid and the recipients are afraid that they'll be interested in the child, so that the donors sometimes say, I just want to make sure that the recipients understand that I'm not the mom. And then the recipients say, well, I hope the donor doesn't think she's the mom. And I think
Yeah.
both people really don't need to be afraid, because that never really comes to be, as you're saying, like you don't see yourself as the mom to these children.
No. My understanding of a mother, like my mum raised me. She is my biological mum, and I guess it's hard to say I'd feel the same if she wasn't, because I don't know. That's not my truth. She is my biological mum. However, the mothering role that she played bear far more significance in who I am and who I became than the fact that I have the same color eyes as her, or the fact that we're a similar height, or the fact that we both have a tendency to like dark chocolate over milk. Those things are just things, but the fundamental understanding of who I am and what I am, and the fact that I, can do certain things and behave certain ways is because she raised me and loved me and cared for me. And that's a mother. That's how I see a mother. And it's exactly why I don't want my own children, because I do not want to take on that role. If motherhood and parenthood was a job description, it does not interest me. The responsibilities are vast, and I salute parents. I hands down, one of the most difficult job, in fact, the most difficult job you can take on. Credit to you all. And for that reason, it's not for me. So I know that for sure. So I guess even if I lived in a place whereby perhaps I was getting paid loads of money, so therefore I'm obviously going to donate my eggs, those children are their children, and they're raised by their parents, and they just have maybe got brown hair.
Right. That's so interesting. I think people will really appreciate that perspective. I'm also wondering, Charlotte, as you're talking about this, how your husband and your family members felt about you doing this. Were people supportive? Were they surprised? What were people's thoughts about it?
My husband is an angel, and he was hugely supportive of it from the very beginning. He has an interesting dynamic as well. I wish he was here actually to just give his 2 pence, because he was raised by his biological mother and not his biological father.
Oh.
And at 21 got told that information, but had up to that point understood that was his biological father. So at 21, he realized that wasn't his biological dad. So he had to go through this kind of transition of understanding if that made a difference to how he felt about that man, now that he knew that he wasn't his biology. So he now has a relationship as well with his biological father, which is beautiful. And it's all, it's all very nice, but it's at 21 receiving that information, and then him having to, okay, well, but that man is still my father because he still raised me and I still love him like my father. Therefore, the fact that he didn't make me actually doesn't really have any bearing on it. And so he had to come to that conclusion himself.
Interesting.
Because there wasn't transparency there. So, but it's just interesting to have that perspective. And obviously I knew that about him, obviously, when I was going through this process. So, it was always a subject that was going to, I guess, touch a nerve in a way, because it's something that he's directly experienced, whereas I haven't. He was super supportive. And again, I think he very much feels like your parents are the people that raise you. Some people's parents are their grandparents or their aunties or their next door neighbors, or people are adopted and they never know their biological parents, but their parents are the people that raise them. And that's how we feel about it. And I know that people feel differently, and that's fine. But he feels very much the same way. So he was very supportive. I think my mum, if I'm being honest, and she might say this isn't true, but I think if she's being honest, my mum and dad would have liked us to have changed our minds and have our own children. Because they had such a beautiful process with their journey and they loved being parents, right? So I think they were hoping that James and I would change our minds. And I think when I decided that this was the process I was going to go down, there was a period of a transitional period where they had to kind of really come to terms with, okay, this probably actually means that they are actually just not interested in having their own. And again, I think that was a really healing process for them as well. And it just allowed that dust to settle. My younger sister wants babies, so I'm like, yes, have some babies. Have all the babies for us both.
I'll visit, right.
But they were very supportive. I think once they'd gone through that processing of an understanding, and I guess really kind of seeing me stand into my truth and myself and my knowing, and saying, like, I don't want them, and I'm willing to go through this to make sure someone else can have that. They were like, okay, great, wonderful. You know what you're doing. You've thought about this, of course, super supportive. And then I've had nothing but curiosity and praise, I guess, has been the two kind of main reactions to it. And then lots of women just being like, wow, it's amazing that you can just give them up like that, because I'd never give away my eggs. Like, I don't feel like they're my eggs, and I very much feel like they're mine. And anything that comes of them would be mine. So people again feel so differently in
Yes.
the conversations I've been having with women through Instagram. It's been really, really eye-opening and really interesting and really beautiful to hear women's perspectives on their body, the autonomy they have over their eggs. It's just been fascinating and a real lesson in like letting go and being like, yeah, that's okay. Like if you're doing it that way, that's great. And I'm doing it this way, and that's also great. And there's been some resistance on Instagram because I think it's a place that invites that kind of behavior sometimes, and invites some keyboard warriors that say things without really thinking that there's a human receiving it at the other end. So yeah, I've obviously covered my story on Instagram. I made it very public in the hopes of encouraging open and honest conversation and vulnerable conversations with women, to try and encourage women to support each other, whatever their choices are.
Nice.
So yeah, I've had mainly curiosity, mainly love. Of course, hundreds of people unfollowed me when I started talking about not wanting babies. But hey, you know, such is life. I'm not really bothered by that. It's just been eye-opening to see both ends of the spectrum, to see people encouraging and being like, wow, that's a beautiful thing to do. And then the far end of the spectrum where women are like, how can you not want babies, but you're giving away your eggs, you're so this, that, and the other. And just like some nasty comments. But honestly, they've been in the minority. So that's good to know.
That's very good. Yeah. You might know, I don't know if you're familiar, but there's the donor conceived community is very mixed. Some people have very strong angry feelings. Some people have very strong loving feelings. Some people feel it's wonderful. Other people don't. And there's quite a lot of controversy now, particularly because ovum donation started, or even, years ago with sperm donation. Early disclosure was not popular, and as a result, many people found out by accident, many people found out late in life, and of course, as you know, with your husband, that can cause identity confusion and a lot of frustration and stress, and so sometimes that can contribute as well. But I think what you're speaking to here is how there's so many ways to be able to feel like I want to help another family and I want to do something that's also really important for me. This was a very important thing for you. And I think it really helps people out there to see that there's different perspectives and there's different ways that people feel about this. And I think, what you're sharing, Charlotte, is really beautiful. And I think it's also great that your family, even though they wanted another grandchild, were able to wrap their minds around it and support you, and that your husband was supportive and all of that. That's really fantastic.
They've got their fur baby grand dog in my little beagle, my 3-year-old beagle called Peggy. So I'm
very cute.
You've got your grand dog.
Very, very cute. That's very, very cute. And so how did you come to becoming a yoga teacher?
I've always practiced. I've practiced since I was 19. And I think actually it was the modeling and the nature of that industry that probably led me to wanting to become a little more introspective. It's quite a externally shell-focused industry, obviously. I think it stems from that. But ultimately, I love the practice. Like I said, I've been practicing for a long time. And after I did my first yoga teacher training 8 years ago now, and I didn't do it to teach. I was like, I'm going to do this training. I'm just going to really immerse myself and love yoga. This is what every yoga teacher says. They do their first training and they don't do it because they want to teach. And ultimately, everyone comes out at the end of that training and they just have had such a transformational experience. I'm like, I need to share this with people because they need to understand how great this is.
Wow.
So I think most yoga teachers end up going on to teach after their first training. It's such a beautiful practice. And I think it kind of links back to what you were saying about the stress that my husband felt at 21 and the identity crisis thing because of not knowing who your biological parents are. He has found yoga such a grounding and centering practice, and it's actually allowed him to come so deep into himself. I think it's really helped that understanding of who he is, because ultimately for him, the people that made him obviously made him possible, but his innate being and his innate self and his center is his alone. It's not his mum's and it's not his dad's. It's him. And I think the practice allows you to keep coming back to that essence and keep strengthening that and cultivating that connection to yourself. That it's a really empowering practice and it's a really beautiful one to help with kind of self-belief and self-confidence and self-love and all of those different things. I love allowing that space to open up for people. So getting to teach it is like the best, literally the best job in the world.
Is he a yoga teacher also?
No, he's not, but he's a yoga practitioner. He does a lot of, has a very heavy practice now. Now that we're married, he doesn't have much choice.
He has no choice. That's so funny.
Bless him.
That's so funny. Well, this has been an amazing, amazing interview. I'm so grateful that you came on today and took the time to talk to me. I know you've been busy with your yoga classes and traveling and all sorts of things, and I'm really grateful to have you here and really have the people out there understand your perspective and who you are. And I really think it helps people get some insight into a world that maybe they're afraid of, or a world that feels very distant for them. And so I think you've given, a lot of insight to us today, and I'm really grateful for it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. And do you have a way that people can reach you, Charlotte? Are there websites or Instagram?
Yes, please. So you can connect with me on Instagram. It's Miss Shah Holmes, Holmes, a bit like Sherlock Holmes. Can you imagine? My parents called me Charlotte Holmes when Sherlock Holmes already existed. So you can connect with me on Instagram, and then on there I've got all of my links to my retreats. If you want to come away and experience yoga or wellness with me, I do a retreat in Ibiza.
Wow,
I also run an online platform where you can practice with me. So yeah, heaps of ways to connect, but just drop me a message on Instagram and say hi. I'd love to hear your stories as well. Like, I find all these stories about people's journeys with IVF and donations really interesting. So yeah, reach out.
So it's CHAR Holmes, right?
Yeah, Miss MISS CHARHOLMES, Miss
Terrific.
Shah Holmes.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll put that up there. And thank you so much again. And for all of you who are out there, please feel free to reach out to Charlotte. She is just such a lovely human being. And I think she'll be open to responding to you on Instagram or on her website. And thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope that this helped give you some insight into some things that maybe you haven't thought about, or some things that you have thought about and you were worried about. I really hope that it helps you. And I hope that you subscribe, because that's how we keep going. And certainly feel free to reach out to me too. I'm always happy to be there for you as well. So I will see you next time.
In our advanced age, to open up a brand new practice that was dedicated to meet the needs of couples for whom finances are a distinct obstacle to their being able to at least give it a try to get pregnant. And our goal is to offer advanced treatment at a more affordable